Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of What's New Teguh. I'm your host, Chris Teguh with Alpine. Now, as you saw in the title, we're actually here to talk about a brand new 6-channel amp from Alpine. This isn't that amp, but I think in order for me to really introduce this amp properly, we need to rewind. We need to rewind to a year ago when we first launched the R-Series amplifier. Now, Alpine's been on a mission to create 3 distinct lines of sound system products: the S-Series, the R-Series, and the X-Series. The R-Series amplifier was the last piece of that puzzle. We already had a great speaker and sub from R, we just needed that amp. Now this delivered. This amplifier matched in both performance and power for both the R-Series speaker and the R-Series subwoofer. So the only thing that lineup was missing back then was a multi-channel amp, basically a consolidated amplifier that can do the job of both a 4-channel and a monoblock. Now instead of doing another 5-channel amp, we wanted to be unique. So we decided to do a 6-channel, and not just any 6-channel, a 6-channel with staggered power. So in order for me to explain the benefit of 6-channel staggered power, I gotta explain 6-channel and 5-channel. Let's try it right now. Now the 5-channel and the 6-channel amp were created for 2 different reasons. The 5-channel amp was really a consolidation of a 4-channel and a mono, basically allowing you to create an entire system, power an entire system with one amplifier, which simplifies the install. The 6-channel amplifier, 6, 8, or 10 multi-channel amplifiers, were really created to power a bunch of speakers. So if your car had 8-channel, 10 channels, you had a single amp that can power all of them. Now, traditionally, those multi-channel amps, they have the same amount of power on every single channel. So if it was a 75 watt, it would be a 75 watt by 6, or maybe a 50 watt by 8, or whatever the case is. And you can usually bridge them, but when you bridge them, you don't really have enough power to power something big like a subwoofer, like a 5-channel could. The 5th channel of that 5-channel amp can actually power a subwoofer. It usually has like 300 watt or even 500 watt. Now, if you can create an amplifier that had the benefits of the 6-channel amp, but also the power of a 5-channel amp for that subwoofer, you'd really have a great thing on your hands. And that's what the R-Series amplifier with staggered power can do. Well, now that we got that out of the way, let's check out that amp. Here's the R-A90S. Let's talk some quick specs. The R-A90S is listed at 100 watt by 4 and 200 watt by 2 at 2 ohm, and 75 watt by 4 and 150 watt by 2 at 4 ohm. That's a little bit hard to digest. So that essentially gives you a 5-channel amp that does 75 watt by 4 plus 500 by 1, or you can use it as a 6-channel that provides 75 watt by 4 and 150 watt by 2. So a really versatile amplifier, and I'm really excited to get this thing open. So let's check it out. This is protected all the way around with this nice bubble wrap, so it can ship very nicely. Here's some hardware. Looks like there's the 4 feet that get mounted to the bottom, just like the previous R-Series amp. There's also 2 Allen keys here for the terminals on the side of the amp. There's a little door here that you can open to pull out the amplifier. And here's the manual. So inside these manuals, I don't know if you guys have had Alpine amps in the past, but one cool thing about our amps is we actually put in there what we call a birth sheet, or a verification certificate. So this certificate actually gives you the actual text measurement when it came off the line. Obviously we have a target spec, which for this particular amplifier was 100 watt by 4 at 2 ohm. It was 75 watt by 4 at 4 ohm. But at the test, and we tested at 2 ohm, instead of doing 100 watt by 4, it actually did 144 watts by 4. That's 50% more than we actually claim. So this amplifier has a lot of headroom. Obviously in this manual we have the standard user manual as well as some warranty information, so if you're interested in that, you can check it out. Alright, let's take a look at this amp. Really nice finish here. This is a kind of a brushed metal look in the front, aggressive, just like the previous amp was. The thickness here measures in about 2 inches. The height, the way I'm looking at it, just under 11 inches, and the width is just under 13 inches. That's about 4 inches longer than the previous amp. What's cool about the way they extruded this metal plate here, you can actually line up the 2 amps together when you're doing the install, so they can kind of flow together. Really cool little piece. The logo plate is actually with a temporary adhesive, so you can actually remove it, rotate it, depending on what orientation you want. If you want landscape or more horizontal, you can do that. So that's pretty cool. Let's take a look at the input side. You guys see that okay? Probably not. I'll fix it in post. So starting from the left, your left, is the power input side. You need 4-gauge wire for that. Next to it is our fusing. The fusing is actually a total of 90 amps of fusing. If you ever want to know how powerful an amp actually is, take a look at the onboard fusing. 90 amps is a lot. Next to that is the input selector. So the inputs are actually balanced and differential. So you can actually do a high level in like speaker direct. You don't need a high to low converter if you don't want to use one. You can use it on board. And if you guys didn't know, we actually have an adapter. It's not a high-low converter, just a physical RCA to high-level speaker wire connector. It's actually called a KCE SP2K. That's what it looks like. Pretty nifty little thing. I bet nobody knows about it. Check it out. If you need a couple, in the bay, just order them. Next to it is our inputs, 6 channels of inputs. They're labeled channel 1 through 6. Generally speaking, you'd say the fronts are 1 and 2, the rears are 3 and 4, subs are 5 and 6. Whatever you guys want to do, you can do. Next to that is our outputs. There's 6 channels of output. Top row is positive, bottom row is negative. Let's get this thing turned around so you can see the controls. Now, there's a lot of control here, which really is the shining point of this amplifier. I'm going to go through it real quick, and then we can talk about the applications after. But channels 1 and 2 primarily meant for either a full range speaker or a tweeter. It has the crossovers for both the lower high pass range and the upper high pass range. Channels 3 and 4 are meant for a full range speaker or a mid range, so it has a either upper a high pass at the bottom end as well as a low pass at the top end. And then channels 5 and 6 are meant for either a full range again or a subwoofer, so it actually has a low pass at the bottom end. And on the end here we have the input for the Rux knob or a bass knob, which allows you to control the bass level of the last 2 channels, 5th and 6th. So if they're bridged as a subwoofer, you can have bass control if you add that separate optional controller. Now each pair of channels actually has an input selector. You can define each pair to have which input you want on the other end. So for example, if you only have one set of inputs to run a full front active system, you can actually select each pair as channel 1, 2. So I'm only going to use one input for each of those channels. Now if you have independent inputs, you can switch the middle ones to 3, 4 and the last ones to 5, 6, but it all lets you use it in both applications, like a 5-channel or a 6-channel, so it's pretty cool. So let's talk applications. This is a very versatile amp with tons of ways you can actually use it. The first one I want to talk about is a 3-way active setup. Now, what does a 3-way active setup look like? In the car, it usually looks like you have a mid-bass driver in the door, so a speaker in the door, a mid-range speaker, a smaller, maybe 3-inch or 2.5-inch speaker up on the dash, and maybe a tweeter somewhere in the car. That's a 3-way active system. You have 3 independent speakers playing a narrow range of sound, so that each one can play them independently. 3 on the left, 3 on the right. That's 6 channels. That's perfect application for a 6-channel amp. Now, how does that look like in aftermarket world? This is how I would set it up, and this is the way I have it in my Civic. We start with a 6.5-inch component set. Now this could be a 6.5, it could be a 6x9 component set, whatever the case is. This is actually an R-S65 C.2, which comes with a 6.5-inch mid-bass driver as well as a tweeter and an inline filter. The inline filter is not going to be used in this setup. We're going to be managing all the frequencies directly off this amplifier. Now the cool thing about this speaker, if you guys don't know this yet, because everything's inline, there's a low pass filter that's built into the speaker. Now that may make you think, wait, how am I supposed to manage them off the amplifier if there is a built-in crossover? There's actually a heat shrunk terminal that is a bypass terminal. So if you actually remove the heat shrink tubing on there and connect to it, you're actually bypassing that crossover to use it actively. So absolutely capable of doing that. So back to the application, we have a tweeter, we have a 6.5-inch mid-bass driver, and now we're going to introduce a 3-inch mid-range to this setup as well. So this is actually a 30MC. This is a speaker we launched last year. Great mid-range driver, very burly little speaker. It's a aluminum cast basket, very large magnet here. Really good speaker for mid-ranges, and it sounds phenomenal in my car, so I would highly recommend it. But this is kind of that speaker to round out this system. Here's the setup in my vehicle. Here's the setup here. We have our tweeter set up at 4,000 hertz and up. We have our mid-range set in bandpass mode. The bottom end frequency is 350, 400. The upper end low pass frequency is at 4,000. That's where the tweeter was crossed over. You get the point there. The input switch is set to channels 1, 2, which means we're just using one signal for all of them. So input switch to 1, 2. Our mid-bass driver is set at 350, 400 and down. And the input switch on there is set to 1, 2 also. So that's all the frequency ranges covered. What I have in my car is actually a subwoofer amp and a 12-inch woofer hooked up as well to really cover that bottom end bass. That's crossed over at 65 down. The 6.5-inch speaker is probably not great at playing those bottom end frequencies, so the subwoofer kicks in for that purpose. Now, this doesn't have a high pass filter at the bottom end, so what you'll have to do is use your head unit or a DSP to put that high pass filter on the bottom end of this mid-range driver. So next, let's talk about the second most common application for the 6-channel amp. I'm going to put these back here. The next application is actually 5-channel mode. Now, 5-channel mode is probably one of the most common amplifiers out there right now, being able to run 4 speakers as well as a subwoofer. In our application, we're going to be using this little guy. This is actually an R-Series coaxial speaker. It's a full range speaker. It plays anywhere from 65 hertz all the way up to 20K, all on its own. Really great speaker to play a full range, very simple system. So in the 5-channel setup with this amplifier, what you would see is one of these speakers, so you'd buy basically 2 pairs of these. They would go front left door, front right door, rear left door, rear right door, and then you'd have a subwoofer in the back. Now let's see what the setup looks like. So here's the controls. You can see channels 1, 2 will be our fronts, and it's actually in basically full range mode. We're doing a high pass at the bottom end to protect it, so it's at about 80 hertz and up. The fronts are set up that way, channels 1 and 2. Channels 3 and 4 are set up just exactly the same, so it's actually high pass at 80 hertz. And then 5th and 6th channels are bridged, so we're actually using the positive of channel 5, the negative of channel 6 to run to that subwoofer. It's at 4 ohms, so it's actually the R-W12D2. Ran in series, which will give us 4 ohm. That is being managed by the 5th and 6th channel here, and that's set to 80 and down. So that's probably your most common system with the 6th channel running in 5-channel mode. So those are the 2 most common setups, the 6-channel 3-way active system as well as the 5-channel mode. Another 6-channel mode, which is pretty clever, is actually using it like a 4-channel. So what you're going to do is a 2-way active setup up front and then use the middle channels, channel 3 and 4, for rear fill. So what you would end up doing, it looks like this. You would use your channels 1 and 2 to run a tweeter. You'd use your channels 3 and 4 just for the rear fill, and you'd use channel 5 and 6 for the mid bass because it's a lot more power, which gives you a lot more mid bass at the bottom end. That's another clever way of using it in 6-channel mode. The next setup you can do is actually a 4-channel mode. So you can actually bridge channels 1, 2, you bridge channels 3, 4, and then you use independent 5 and 6. What that gives you is a really, really powerful 4-channel amp. That's 200 by 2 and 150 by 2. So, for example, if you're running it in a boat or a side-by-side where you need a lot of power, that amplifier can do that 4-channel mode. The next application is actually a 3-way mode. So you bridge channels 1 and 2, you bridge channels 3 and 4, and then you bridge channels 5 and 6. So you have basically a 200 by 2 and then a 500 by 1. So if you have a very small vehicle and you only want full range loudspeakers up front as well as a subwoofer, 3-channel mode will do you well there. So those are the applications. There's probably more that I haven't covered, but those are probably the most common. I think really the cool thing about this amp is the idea of one amp doing all those things for you. And there's something that we use internally, what we call the upgrade path. And what that basically means is a customer can start out their system with a basic 5-channel mode, right? So they can buy this 6-channel, use it in 5-channel mode, have a simple setup, 4 speakers in the sub. Down the road, if they're interested in getting a more advanced setup like a two-way active or a three-way active, they wouldn't have to get rid of this amp. They can actually just reconfigure it to power a more robust system and maybe add another amplifier to run the sub. So this amp can stay with you for a long time and power a ton of systems because of its versatility. So the last couple things I want to talk about with this amp, high resolution capable, as well as our other 4-channel amp. They're all high-res compatible. The speakers can go up to 45 kilohertz as well, so the entire R-Series family is high-res compatible. And now we have a multi-channel amp as well as a 4-channel and a mono that work perfectly well with our speakers and our subwoofer within the family of R-Series product. Thanks for joining us on our first episode of What's New Teguh. If you like this video, be sure to like Alpine Teguh on Facebook. Add some comment. If you have any follow-up questions to anything we talked about today, add them to the comment block. Let me know if there's anything you want to see in the future. Stay safe out there. Tune in next time for What's New.